How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Shawn Stewart of Sports for America here. I would like to remind you that Football for Sunday, formerly known as NFL for Sunday, will begin its new schedule and new season Sunday, September 12th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sports for America Radio, and you can also listen to it on Mixler as well. Thank you. All right, now, as you know, it is going to be college football, and as a matter of fact, it is going to be week one of college football. So, ladies and gentlemen, my first guest since I came back from vacation, he is a sports talk show radio host on KDWN. You can hear that on iHeartRadio and on Audacity. And he's a Detroit sports fan, by the way. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my good friend, Mr. Chris Winn, to the program. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. And yeah, born and raised in Lansing, Michigan. So obviously, allegiance to all things Spartans and have all kinds of allegiance and enjoy getting the chance to talk about my home state and my hometown team, obviously in the Michigan State Spartans.
All right, because I actually been to Lansing before. I'd never been to East Lansing before, but it's nice. I like Lansing.
Yeah, it's got history, right? I mean, when you want to talk college football and you want to talk pigskin, there's obviously we're going to talk a lot probably about Columbus and Ann Arbor and what's going on in Michigan, but Michigan State's one of those teams, along with Wisconsin, and especially this season here in 2021, that are going to be much mentioned. Let's put it that way. When you want to talk Big Ten football.
So, as a matter of fact, we are going to be talking about Big Ten because it is my neck of the woods, and plus, I'm from Detroit. So, of course, I'm Big Ten guy anyway. So, as I'm looking at the odds right now, of course, Ohio State is a favorite by minus 170, and then I'm seeing some two favorites, some underdogs. I see like Penn State like a plus 800, and then Wisconsin like a plus 900. Now, as you know, Ohio State's been dominating the Big Ten and God knows what. But when you look at this conference and you see the look on Ohio State, what team do you see that Ohio State could have a trouble if they were to face a team possibly in like the Big Ten championship?
Well, I got to say, I do like this Wisconsin Badgers team. I talk about teams in the Big Ten, in general, that they could have issues with. I mean, the Badgers, you're talking about a team that is, the media loves them when it comes to a preseason poll in that division. I mean, this is a team that, last year came within, they had obviously the 28-7 loss at Iowa. But as everybody knows, last year, 2020 being a COVID-19 season where there were so many things that went unorthodox, let's put it that way, when it came to the Big Ten. Wisconsin was one of those teams that was absolutely affected by that. You had a situation where Graham Mertz was pre-injury. It was a guy who went out there and just destroyed a team like Illinois in week one, but then after he got hurt, ended up being inconsistent the rest of the way. So I look at the Badgers really to be one of those teams that could challenge Ohio State. You look at the Badgers defense. This is they got a defense that is loaded across the board with guys coming back. But they do have a few questions on offense there in Madison. But that being said, I think that their status as favorites in the West is absolutely justified. And we're going to find out week one, Sean. I'm telling you right now, we're going to find out week one because you're going to have Wisconsin going up against Penn State in that matchup, and that's going to determine a lot of things. And it's going to kind of set the tone with what to expect from some of the top-tier teams in the Big Ten that are not based in Columbus, obviously, with Ohio State.
Now, what I find interesting is this year's college football season because usually week one usually be like that a lot of big games, you know what I mean? And then week two is kind of like a softie. But now you look at it, this year is week one is soft, and then week two, you're going to see a lot of great games in week two. That's the one I'm really anxious, really excited about is week two in college football. Because that's when Michigan starts playing, and then you have Alabama and Miami. I can't wait to see that game because that's going to be a heck of a game between those two. So it's like week two, I'm very excited than it is with week one because week one you do have a couple of games that have in mind you can watch and put some money on.
Well, it's funny you mentioned week two. You could go out on a limb right now and say that the Big Ten could set the tone for the entire country regarding college football. Now, look, we've been talking about it till the cows come home about how good the SEC is, and everybody wants to start ranking conferences and all this. But, there's going to be a narrative out there, I'm telling you right now, after week 2, that the Big Ten is going to have some of the best football in the country in 2021 because you've got these monster showdowns in the top 25. You've got Ohio State, you've got Michigan and Iowa, all with games against non-conference teams in Oregon with Washington and Iowa State. So there's going to be an opportunity, for an ability to see the Big Ten shine. And say for example, and look, there's been some media members that have said that the Big Ten is going to win all 3 of those matchups, right, in the non-conference. So if you get both, get the Buckeyes, the Wolverines, and the Hawkeyes all winning those games in week 2 against quality opponents, the likes of the Ducks and obviously the Huskies and the Cyclones, then people are going to be saying that the Big Ten is absolutely legitimate, and it's going to be, quality football that's going to be worth watching all season long, my friend.
And then you look at the Michigan Wolverines. They don't begin their season until September the 3rd because they will be playing Northwestern, and then they'll be playing Miami on September the 18th. So it looks like Michigan State's schedule is pretty different than previous schedules they have seen. So, and then we don't play, Michigan State don't play till like October the 30th. That's like one day before Halloween. And then I'm also looking at Indiana because that was a team that really surprised me because if you look at Indiana, I love their offense, but defense is kind of okay. What do you see with Indiana with their football team?
Yeah, Indiana's a team that is absolutely talented. Make no question about it. Tom Allen's a very good coach. Okay, and if you're a college football fan, you love what he's building there in Bloomington. No, look, we haven't talked about Indiana since probably the 90s, right, when they had, like, decent running backs back then. They had, Antoine Randall L. and the likes of those guys. But this is a legit program right now. I mean, you're talking about a program that's much talked about around the country. This is a team that – but I got to tell you, though, go to Iowa City and play the Hawkeyes. They have to go at Penn State, and they have to go at Michigan. They've also got Cincinnati on the schedule, too, a non-conference, so that's going to be a tough matchup playing against the Bearcats. So, obviously, you look to October 23rd when you're talking about the Hoosiers because they take on the Buckeyes in Bloomington, and that's going to be a lot of fun, obviously, seeing Ohio State and Indiana go at it, and probably going to give you a gauge onto exactly if the Hoosiers are for real or not. But look, to be quite honest with you, Indiana is the team that's going to win games, and they're going to go to a bowl game. And you may even consider them being a second best team probably in the Big Ten East. So yes, I think it's a quality football team. I like Tom Allen a lot as a head coach there, and there's no question that Hoosier fans I think are going to be pleasantly surprised by the product that they have out there on the field and on the gridiron for the Indiana Hoosiers.
And by the way, Indiana's in the same division as Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, and Rutgers, by the way. So there is going to be a very interesting Big Ten East from what I'm looking at.
Oh, there's no question about it. And, you can talk about the Hawkeyes even. This is a team that, even though they have some questions going, they finished with, as one of the more impressive teams in the country. 6 straight wins last year in Iowa. Northwestern team that, Northwestern's always a team that people sleep on, right? You think about Northwestern, you think about the academics, you think about, again, this is another team that, back in the 90s, with some of the guys, teams that went to the Rose Bowl, even some teams in the early 2000s that were really good. Excuse me, but you have probably in the Wildcats, you probably have one of the best coach teams in the country. Okay, I mean, you'd love Pat Fitzgerald as a head coach there. Unfortunately for Northwestern, though, they don't have a lot of guys returning. They have, I want to say, they just have 4 starters on each side of the ball returning, and that's the fewest since, I think, in like 7 or 8 years, since 2014. So, I mean, you're talking about a lead receiver with Northwestern that had 67 yards last year. You had a linebacker tandem there of Patty Fisher and Blake Gallagher. who were just big-time contributors on their defense, and they're gone too. So there's going to have to be some revamping, let's put it that way, with Northwestern, but they still should be a decent squad. And then, we already talked about Wisconsin. Minnesota's a team. I'm telling you, Minnesota, Shawn, is a team, look, they had a subpar year last year under P.J. Fleck, and now people up there in the Twin Cities are kind of panicking a little bit, but I don't think they need to. I mean, this is a team. You look back just 2 years ago, they won 11 games, and were a couple OT losses away from being outstanding. So, and they've got a ton of people coming back, starters, and also some transfers that are going to make a big difference to bolster, especially that defense, that run defense for that team. So, I think that if you look at the Golden Gophers, that's a team that could be title contenders in the Big Ten West also. So, obviously we're going to see a test right there with the Golden Gophers because they play Ohio State opening up the season. So that'll be interesting, to say the least, to see Minnesota take on Ohio State. But these are some of the teams that I'm taking a look at.
As a matter of fact, I do have a friend that is a Golden Gophers fan. As far as I know, he's the only friend I know on Facebook that is a Golden Gophers fan because he's from Minnesota. Now with the Pac-12, now this one's just kind of like an odd for me. Now, of course, Oregon is the favorite to win that Pac-12 championship and win that conference, and then Washington, they're like a plus 350, and then USC, no surprise, they're like the third favorite, they're like a plus 400. And so when I'm looking at USC, like USC could possibly win the Pac-12 championship, because you never know what's going to happen with Oregon, because Oregon, they'll lose to somebody that they shouldn't have. So when you look at this as a conference, because I'm from the East Coast, because we as East Coast people don't talk about the Pac-12 as much, because we mostly talk about the Big Ten, the ACC, and the SEC. What do people need to know about the Pac-12 for this upcoming season?
Well, Pac-12 is interesting, as someone who's here in Las Vegas and covers the Mountain West, actually, because I cover UNLV out here. But very familiar, obviously, with the Pac-12 because we have so many matchups as far as the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. Really, though, to be honest with you, there's probably three teams that you're looking at, I think, in the Pac. You're probably looking at Oregon. Oregon is the perennial team as of late. We're talking about the last 4 or 5 years, obviously, with the Ducks. They are loaded across the board, both offensively and defensively. They're probably going to be a team that's going to be in the top 10 throughout the entire season. But also, I love Arizona State. What Herm Edwards is able to do at Arizona State, they return a ton of stars, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to be dominant defensively down there at Arizona State in Tempe. And also, you brought up USC. USC is going to be right there in the mix on that side of the division, in that division, I should say, with Arizona State. But I like Utah a lot. Kyle Whittingham's a guy who, obviously, a guy who's, built programs. He's been able to elevate programs to respectability and beyond. And he's got a lot of talent up there, obviously, with Utah. This is a program making the transition, obviously, from just into the Big Ten in recent years, into the Pac-12 just in recent years. But I like the Utes a lot. So I think it's going to be, to be honest with you, I think it's going to be, or you're gonna have, and Washington, throw Washington in the mix there, obviously too.
Because Michigan does play Washington on the 11th.
Yeah, obviously the loss of Easton at quarterback is going to be, I think, rough for them on the offensive side of the ball. But the Huskies, always a team when it comes to defensively, always a team that you're going to talk about in the mix as one of the best defensive teams in the country too. So those are probably the four teams. You're looking at Oregon, obviously Arizona State, and Utah, as well as Washington, and then you get into the mix. You brought up USC. There's question marks, obviously, with Slovis at the quarterback position, whether or not he's going to keep the job at the quarterback position. And they seem to always retool when it comes to offensive players, right? When it comes to skill position players down there at Southern Cal, they always seem to have some guys that step up, and they're going to have some breakout players that are freshmen that are going to be making contributions there for USC. But USC is kind of in that mix of those middle-of-the-road teams in the Pac-12. So I don't know if you mentioned them as maybe a team that could win the conference. I don't really necessarily would see it that way. I think it's more along the lines of Oregon, Washington, Utah, and Arizona State are going to be the teams that are going to be vying for that Pac-12 title. But to be quite honest with you, I mean, I look at the Pac-12, it's going to be a lot like what it's been the last few years. They're going to have really good teams, Sean. They're going to have really good teams, but they're not going to be in the mix when we start talking about the college football playoff and maybe winning a national title. I just don't think that they're going to be in that mix of those teams. They've got a lot of teams that could be, you know what I'm trying to say? They have a lot of those teams that could be within eighth in the country and 15th in the country, but they're not going to be a team that's going to be in the top 5 that's going to challenge the likes of Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and some of these other teams to win a national championship.
Exactly what you mean by that. And by the way, USC is about to open their home game against San Jose State. So that's like 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'll be on the Pac-12 network on September the 2nd as well. So
yeah, and San Jose State, by the way, you think about San Jose State, the other Spartan team, and they were just, they just walked over for years, right? Nobody talks about San Jose State football. That's not the case anymore. San Jose State right now is one of the best teams in the Mountain West Conference, and you're starting to, you're going to actually see them on the national level when it comes to some national broadcasts. You're going to see San Jose State football take a more prominent role, in college football as far as being out there more because of the success they obviously had last year, and I think they're going to build on it. And they love the coaching situation there. They love the climate, the environment that's being built up there as far as college football is concerned. So, and that's never been the case when you want to talk about San Jose State Spartan football. So that's not exactly a walkover game for a Pac-12 team having to take on a team like San Jose State.
I meant September 4th, not September 2nd. And by the way, you are right. They are going to be nationally televised because the first game is on the 28th. They'll be on the CBS Sports Network, and then they'll be on FS1 and CBS Sports Network as well. So it's good for them to get publicity because, there may be a team that many people in the nation don't know about, especially us as East Coasters. Then we look as like, hey, how does team get so good and how does team so ranked? And let's not to mention, they did win their conference last season, the COVID season as well.
Yeah, and COVID-19, I mean, look, and especially in the Big Ten, right? Last year, COVID-19 was just absolutely a massive factor. I mean, you had, obviously, Ohio State, what was the big debate last year? Oh, they didn't play enough games. The Buckeyes didn't chance. I mean, you have all these Big Ten teams playing 5-6 games. How are you even considering them for the college football playoff and this and that? And it was just it was a huge what show when it came to COVID-19.
Right.
And myself, obviously, as someone who followed Michigan State football, the Spartans, you can make an argument that Michigan State was a team that was as affected by COVID-19 as any college football team in the country.
Yes, they were.
With all the guys that they missed because of the illness and because of the protocols and everything that was going down. So I think obviously going back here to 2021, everything's basically returning back to normal with regards to the schedule, with regards to having stadiums that are going to be filled, with regards to having, practices, with regards to having face-to-face contact with the coaches and recruiters and the recruits, I should say. So it's obviously, is it back completely to normal? No, but it is back to more of an semblance where you can get a real gauge on what these teams across college football and in the Big Ten are going to be able to do.
Now, there's another conference that we usually don't talk about. Well, unless it's like Texas or Oklahoma, we'll talk about the Big 12. But I've been hearing that many people are the team that's overlooked is TCU, because many people don't know TCU like that as far as a college football program. So when you look at the Big 12, of course, Oklahoma is favored to win the conference as well. What are you looking forward to see in the Big 12? Because Texas and Oklahoma is going to be in the SEC for a couple of years. So where do you see some teams making any noise outside of Texas and Oklahoma?
Yeah, well, TCU, you talk about them specifically. Obviously, when you think about the Big 12, obviously all the news on the last month and a half has been monumental, and just on an entire national level as far as college football is concerned. But this is but specifically, you want to talk TCU. This is a team last year that, their offense was just inconsistent across the board. They just didn't, but it was, look, they ended up getting 6 wins, but, the defense was just, it was, the defense was just not great. It was, a defense that gave up over 31 points a game, I believe, and, and it was a team offensively. They couldn't even score points. They scored, I think, over 14 points 3 times. And, but when it comes to TCU now, this year in 2021, you've got 9 starters on the offensive side expect to be back. So, and, you got a ton of help coming in from the transfer portal as well, too. And so they're going to be more explosive when you look at this Horned Frogs team. You've got Max Dugan, who's a solid quarterback there, and he's kind of not really a dual threat guy, but he's a special type of kind of playmaker guy. And he can not only obviously can run the football, but he led the team in rushing last year with over 500 yards and 10 touchdowns as well too. And they also brought in a guy in Chandler Morris from Oklahoma, by the way, who's probably going to get some snaps as well too, because he's also a guy that's a dual threat guy there. So they had Pro Wells, who I don't know if he's what NFL team he's on now. I think he was an undrafted free agent at the tight end position. He was the guy who was their leader offensively last year with 3 touchdowns. So they're going to. Quentin Johnson also was a guy that was big time for them as well too. So I like the Horned Frogs. I think the Horned Frogs can absolutely be one of those teams that's going to challenge both Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12. I'm obviously going off the top of my head here. I didn't, I didn't necessarily prepare for a Big 12 preview, but I do think that both TCU and I think Baylor as well too is going to be a team that's going to contend in that conference also.
And let's not forget, the Big 12 don't have a network like Fox or ESPN. Well, they televise this game, but they don't have like their actual own network. The only one that has their own network is like the Longhorns. So go figure with that. And
think about this, right? They just got kneecapped. This is the conference that just got their legs taken out from under them. And look, we understand that we're still a few years away from the transition actually happening, right? Where you got 2 of the top tier cornerstone programs going from the Big 12 to the SEC, obviously in Texas and Oklahoma. And by the way, I don't think that the news is over with yet, my friend. I think that there's going to be other things going on. I think that the Big Ten is going to take a look at making a run at teams like Iowa State and Kansas for obvious reasons. Because Iowa State and Kansas are Big Ten teams. You know what I mean? As far as location, as far as you know what I mean? And especially in the basketball side of things, they would love to get the Jayhawks into the Big Ten. So I still think there's going to be a shakeup regarding other teams in the Big 12. There's been obviously talk about teams in the Pac-12 the Pac-12 trying to poach a couple more teams from the Big 12 as well too. So there's going to be that whole situation with both the Longhorns and the Sooners going to the SEC and the SEC bolstering themselves has created kind of a domino effect across college football and has made a huge difference. And I think they're not the only 2 stones that are getting overturned. There's going to be more action, I'm telling you, my friend, when it comes to college football, and we're going to see some more shakeups.
Now, I did mention that on my podcast earlier ago with my co-host, and I was like, me and my co-host, we could both see Iowa State in the Big Ten, because when you think about the Big Ten, you think of football. But don't get me wrong, you do have some schools in the Big Ten that's like good in basketball, like Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Illinois, Indiana. I never thought Illinois was going to be that good last season, but that's a subject for another topic. So I could see schools like that be in the Big Ten realm.
What's crazy too is there's been even talk about the Big Ten trying to get the likes of USC and some others. You know what I mean? Trying to get that coast to coast love. And look, obviously, when you talk about college football, it's all about brands, right? It's all about having the big time brands in your conference. That we've seen that obviously with the transition regarding the SEC and some of the programs that were in the Big 12 before. When you talk about Texas A&M and some of these others, right, that have made the transition over to the SEC, and the Big Ten trying to, and Big Ten kind of following suit with bringing in, programs like Maryland Terrapins, bringing in the Rutgers, bringing in some other pieces. Obviously back, we're talking, 15, 20 years ago with Penn State, when they brought in Penn State into the mix, and even more recently with Nebraska, with the Cornhuskers, bringing them over from the Big 12 as well too. So yeah, while everybody's talking about how the SEC is loading up and is just solidifying themselves as the top conference in college, but the Big Ten and to some extent now the Pac-12 with the ACC as well too. Obviously, you've heard about the alliance here in the last 24 hours, where they've developed this quote unquote alliance between those three conferences: the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC. That's more off the field stuff that's been focused on here in the last 24 hours regarding just trying to elevate the student athlete and college football as a whole. It's not necessarily going to be in this, something that you see in the schedule making. Like, you're not going to have a bunch of games every season where you're going to have, a USC playing at Michigan or Ohio State playing in Oregon. You're going to have maybe one or two games every season, but it's not going to be something where, cross-conference type of where they just all join together. But getting back to what you were saying, I mean, it's more about, the Big Ten is a pretty strong conference too, and they can flex their muscle, absolutely will, when it comes to, this whole shakeup in college football. And they will look to bring in programs, whether it's not just from the Big 12, they may even actually look at Pac-12 teams that they might want to get and bring into the fold when it comes to the Big Ten Conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Winn, talk radio host on KDWN, and like I said, you can listen to KDWN either on iHeartRadio or Odyssey. So where can my listeners find you on social media and your shows?
I'm all over social media, my friend. You can follow me on Twitter at Christian Winn. Also follow me on Facebook and at Christian W. Winn, as well as on Instagram at CWin77. Talking all things sports. I have a great opportunity here, obviously being here in Las Vegas, because I also am someone who gets the chance to talk a lot about the sports betting angle. I get to obviously go over everything when it comes to Las Vegas sports, whether it's the Raiders, whether it's Golden Knights, whether it's UNLV sports, and then being, of course, on the West Coast here, big time focus on the West Coast. Even though I'm a Michigan guy,
right,
through and through, get a chance to go hang out down at the Circa, which is a new resort here in Las Vegas, owned by Derek Stevens, a Detroit, Michigan native.
All right.
And he's done a great job with the Circa downtown. He also owns the D, which for obvious reasons has the Michigan connection down there, downtown Las Vegas. And so obviously get a chance to go down there a lot and watch a lot of Michigan football, Michigan State football, Detroit Lions football, and all Detroit sports across the board, whether it's the Tigers, the Red Wings, and the Pistons now with Cade Cunningham in the mix. The Pistons might actually have some relevance now when it comes to the Eastern Conference. So a lot going on, my friend, and we're getting right into September here, where it's going to be sports across the board. And obviously, I hope everyone's staying safe out there, and the pandemic is making the transition to try to get back to a more normal life, and that includes the sports world as well, too.
And the only difference between us and you guys is that we don't have a Jack in the Box or a Whataburger, but you guys do have White Castle. I think it's been 2 years since a White Castle's been there in Vegas now.
Yeah, it's been great. When that rolled into town, it was a welcome sight for us us transplanted Michiganders out here.
Right.
But I will say this, though, we do have the All-American Coney Island, which is also inside the D downtown. So I do get my fix of my Conies, because obviously, when I'm back in Detroit, I got to make a run down to Lafayette Coney Island, and or All-American Coney Island. So I'm a big fan. But we do have that. So look, living here in Las Vegas is great. I mean, not to get off on a tangent, but there's a lot of us Midwesterners that are transplanted here out in Las Vegas, and no shortage
I'm
of
not
folks
surprised,
from no shortage, my friend, of folks from Michigan camped out here in Sin City, without a doubt.
That is not surprising because I knew a lot of people that's from the Midwest and stayed in Vegas for the rest of their life. So I was like, hey, do what's best for you. Great idea for you. Because once you're in Vegas, like it's hard for you to ever leave.
Oh, there's no doubt, and yeah, from a way, there's a lot to like about living out here in Las Vegas, and as someone like myself who has been a lifelong sports guy and has had the good fortune of working in the media, both in television and radio, as in other parts of the country. And I worked in Orlando, Florida for a little bit, worked in the Boston area, went to college, and I'm a big time proponent of this city, and obviously, with the sports betting expanding basically nationwide right now. I mean, even in Michigan, you're talking about the ability for sports fans out there to be able to wager on games, and it makes it much more accessible. Look, Michigan is full of sports fans anyway, right? I mean, you're talking about the sports culture in Michigan, it's as good as any state in the country. But it is a cool kind of thing. From my perspective, as someone who's been here in Las Vegas for almost 20 years, it's really cool to see that people around the country have easier access if they want to get their sports wagering in and get a chance to kind of look at it from that angle. So, but that being said, yeah, I absolutely love it out here, and it's been great talking to you, and look forward to doing it again soon in the future, Shawn.
Exactly. Thank you so very much, and look forward to having you on the future show. Take care.
Absolutely. Enjoy the week, and have a good one, okay?
Oh, yes, most definitely.